Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Committee of the Whole meeting today. I will call us to order, and we will begin with our land acknowledgement. And Councillor Potts, could I trouble you to read the land acknowledgement, please?
For more than 15,000 years, the First Nations walked upon and cared for the lands we now call home. Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Ojibwe, and many others who were families, friends, and communities the way we are today. The town of Collingwood acknowledges the Lake Simcoe Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818 and the relationship it establishes with the original inhabitants of Turtle Island. We acknowledge the reality of our shared history and the current contributions of the Indigenous people within our community. We seek to continue empowering expressions of pride amongst all the diverse stakeholders in this area. We seek to do better and to continue to recognize, learn, and grow in friendship and community, nation to nation.
Thank you. And before we proceed to the adoption of the agenda, I would also like to make a statement in the proclamation of September 11th as a Provincial Day of Service. And I know that our deputant has some more information with respect to a federal statement. But the Provincial Day of Service of Ontario honors those who lost their lives in the attacks, pays respect to families and friends who still feel their loss, and acknowledges the incredible act of courage, sacrifice, and kindness that were made on and following that day. And we remember everyone. So moving forward, the adoption of the agenda, that the content of the Committee of the Whole agenda for September 11, 2023 be adopted as presented. If I could have a mover and a seconder, please, to start. Councillor Doherty, Deputy Mayor Fryer. I would like to ask now if there's anyone who has an item under other business. If we know now, we can work on our timing. Anybody contemplating? Yes, Councillor Doherty, Vice Chair Doherty.
Thank you, Chair.
I will get used to this, I promise. I will be bringing forward a notice of motion with regard to an upcoming application to the federal government for funding.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. I will mark that on. Is there anybody else with other business? I will be adding a notice of motion with respect to or integration into the appropriate process regarding a review of the tree caliper with the view of increasing the percentage of larger caliper trees within our planning process. And also under department updates, I'm going to ask our Executive Director, Amanda Pegg, to just give a really quick update on the public consultation for the grain terminals. I've received a lot of questions for that at the booth. All right, so I think that's great. So with those amendments and changes, we'll vote on the agenda. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Declarations of pecuniary interest, I believe. Deputy Mayor Fryer.
Thank you, Chair Jeffrey. In regards to item 5.2 C2023-18, taxi licensing bylaw, as per the code of conduct, I will step away from the discussions on that item as I have a relative that has local taxi ownership interest.
Okay, thank you for that. I will make sure we give you time to recuse yourself. We're going to move over item 4 right now, and we're going to move into our first staff report, 5.1, and it is C2023-17. It's the updated council staff relations policy, deferred from July 24, 2023. So Clerk Almas will be presenting. So Clerk Almas, take it away.
Thank you, Chair Jeffrey. And as you may recall, this report was first presented to Committee of the Whole on July the 24th. So we haven't updated actually this slide. So it was requested to be deferred to this Committee of the Whole, so there could be further review and consideration by Council. So if we'll go to our first slide. We do have some new policy updates and amendments that we are proposing to the council staff relations policy. It is an older policy that was put into place in approximately, I believe actually it was 2018-ish. And there's been a number of items that between the functional abilities and working with the document, as well as additional recommendations coming from the JI that recommended some enhancements. We do have some changes that we're proposing here today. So I'll move right into the amendments that we're proposing. So our next slide talks about policy statements. So our policy statement is updated, and the proposed statement that we are consolidating is the provision of public service excellence and effective governance depends on a culture of trust and respect, including positive two-way communication between council and staff, acting in accordance to the roles set out in the Municipal Act, timely information for decision makers, and making the best uses of resources. And this is pretty self-explanatory. However, we really wanted to pull that out and make that a strong change on what we were looking for and what the expectation is between council and staff regarding the policy. The purposes has also been updated and simplified. So the purpose is that this policy is to guide the nature of professional business interactions between members of council and staff and provide a framework for that relationship. In our next slide, we have some scope changes. So 3.1, this policy applies to members of council and all town staff and is intended to complement the procedural bylaw and the codes of conduct. If there is a discrepancy between this policy and the procedural bylaw or a code of conduct, the procedural bylaw or code of conduct will prevail. 3.2 provides that this policy shall be applied wherever and whenever interactions occur between council and staff, including on-site or off-site, as well as during and outside regular business hours and via all channels, including in-person, electronic meetings, via written correspondence, email, messaging tools, and texting. And this too was an enhancement, as these various forms were not addressed in the previous policy. So we know that there is other interactions that happen outside of the council table that should be addressed and ensure that a framework is put around that relationship between members of council and staff. Our next slide talks about principles. So our previous policy did not have principles. So we have added 4 principles outlining the reason why we have this framework in place. So it's regarding municipal governance excellence, open and clear communications, equality and transparency, and respectful workplace. And those are actually further defined in the report, but I won't get into the details of them today. Maybe one that we will focus on, because it's actually part of our community-based strategic plan, is municipal governance excellence. And this is ensuring that council and staff have the tools needed to deliver their duties and jobs well, while supporting and building a culture of trust and respect between council staff and the public, and supporting the efficient and effective use of town resources, including human resources, in a transparent and accountable manner. Next slide. We've also provided some enhanced definitions. So the definitions that we provided for in this policy include the list that's noted above on the slides. So the role of the CAO clerk, what the definition of code of conduct is. One of the items that's new in this is service Collingwood. And the reason why this was presented on July 24th originally was to coincide with the customer service policy, where it talks about service Collingwood and service Collingwood standards. And some of the old items that remain effective in this policy are the routine and the non-routine matters. Our next slide. So we talk about the refined reporting relationship and joint roles of council and staff. So this is a new provision that is added. This is the joint roles. So what is expected from both council and staff, demonstrating the commitment to accountability and transparency, leadership by making sound decisions based on knowledge, advice, and sound judgment, maintaining confidentiality as prescribed in the Municipal Act, actually in the Municipal Freedom of Information Protection and Privacy Act, truly, faithfully, and partially exercising roles to the best of our abilities and knowledge. And again, this is something that's also reiterated in Council's inauguration and their oath of office. Enhancing public understanding of the political processes by providing information about decision-making processes. Upholding the decisions of council as a whole, regardless of opinion or belief, and commit to the implementation of those decisions, and seeking to achieve and maintain an environment of mutual trust and respect. Our next slide about clarification is provided on the process for inquiries. So we have provided actually a detailed process for inquiries, and this is one change that has happened from our previous policy that we had in place. This provides a little bit more flexibility on routine and non-routine matters, and the process in which a member of council would follow up with staff or assist a member of the public in contacting staff. So this includes definitions for routine and non-routine matters to align with proposed customer service standards policy. The refinement of when council should be copied on all responses in alignment with open meeting provisions of the Municipal Act, as council cannot debate information related to council decisions outside of council meetings, in particular matters that can materially advance the business of council and the decision-making process. The process to request staff participation in meetings and events, and ensuring the requests for staff efforts are clear, succinct, and needed to fill council duties, and considering the impact on daily staff duties and overall corporate capacity. And if we go to the next slide. So Appendix 1 has been added. So this is something new as well. This was a reference that Justice Frank Morocco had actually provided an inquiry on a recommended best practice of a municipality's council staff relations policy, and it's providing clarification on what a political and corporate record is. So that's what we've included in Appendix 1, and Appendix 2 adds some practical examples and scenarios for reference for council members to review and help to further clarify the provisions that are provided for within the policy. And I think those are the key items that I wanted to address. One of the last items that I'll note is that upon legal review, one of the clarifications we really wanted to ensure that that has come up on occasion here at the council table is the discussion on when staff reports are received by council through the agenda package that's posted publicly for the public as well. But if members of council have questions regarding information in staff reports and want further clarification, doing your due diligence before you make a decision at the table, that any questions that are provided in advance to staff, that staff understand that if it takes an additional amount of staff resources or capacity to respond, that a response would be provided at the meeting. And if it's provided in advance of the meeting, that information, of course, is circulated to all members of council. And in accordance with the open meeting policies, that information is also made available to the public during the public presentations. And that is the conclusion of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Clerk Almas. So first, we will proceed to ask if there is someone in the gallery who wishes to speak to this staff report. And seeing none, then I'll ask the clerk to check online to see if we have a participant.
Thank you, Chair Jeffrey. We do have a couple of attendees participating remotely. If there's any participant wishing to address the staff report before the committee, please press the raise your hand feature at the bottom of your screen. There's no interest at this time, Chair.
Thank you very much. So the motion that is going to be on the floor this evening, that staff report C 2023-17, updated council staff relations policy be received, and that council approve the updated corporate policy entitled council staff relations policy as presented herein. And could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Baines and Councillor Ring. And I will sever these items. So what we will vote on firstly is the receiving of the report and the policy. So all those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. All right. So moving into the second piece, I'm going to ask to pass the gavel to Vice Chair Doherty, because I think my comments and some that I did receive from the mayor, I would like to be able to shape the conversation. I think I can only do that by making these comments. So the chair is yours.
Very good, Chair. So are there any comments from members of the committee?
Thanks.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Yes, thank you.
Chair
I'd just like
Jeffrey.
to make my comments first. I've read the policy twice. I'd asked for it to be referred the first time, which was supported. And I just get some angst that the length of it and I just can't fathom why it takes about 5,000 words to describe a relationship that I think is pretty easily managed through a lot of other procedural policies and things we have in place, municipal act, code of conduct, procedural bylaw. And when I think of what we take on at the inauguration and what we sign and commit to in that one-page document and we sign and what we're responsible for is done in a bullet point of maybe 5 or 6 bullet points on one page. I'm a little afraid that this is creating, and no one else may feel this way, but for me, I just feel like we're building walls instead of cohesiveness in an overall policy. So I'm not saying we don't need a policy. I'm just thinking we need something a little higher level, principled and bulleted and shortened. So that's just the comments I wanted to make. The other request that I had received earlier today was that it be continued over 2 weeks' time for all council members to send in, as opposed to getting into a clause by clause discussion tonight, that we have 2 weeks to send our input. But I just wanted to be able to have my say first, and then I'll listen to everybody else, and we'll see where we end up. But I think my druthers right now is that we that what I will bring after I've heard all the other conversation is maybe a motion to consider a shortened, more principled bullet format of this policy. So that's it for now. I know it's been a lot of work. Our clerk's awesome. She's got us on our toes all the time. So I look forward to your comments. So
okay, thank you, Chair. And I see the Deputy Mayor has a card up.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I had similar concerns. I was looking, and not having participated in the original document, I've been trying to look at this and be open-minded about it. But I had looked at the Ontario Municipal and Councillor's Guide that the province provides. And it seems to be that is partly what's forming the basis of some of the important aspects of this proposed policy. So I too was hesitant to want to put too much in place that I think it may already be in other areas that councillors are expected to follow. The one question I would ask is, it mentions Strategy Core on page 5 as being consulted, and I have a lot of faith and respect for Strategy Core, and it says that they confirm that our current policy is best practice, and that further clarifications would be beneficial. But I wondered if there was any specific ones that they felt that maybe there needed to be clarification on when they provided some opinion, I guess is what they had done.
Question to
I would expect
Sorry.
the Clerk Thomas as presented.
Okay. Clerk Almas.
Thank you, Vice Chair. To address that question, Strategy Corps is quite impressed in our processes, and there's not a lot of municipalities that really get into the importance of sharing the information and have all council getting the same information, you know, whether it's summarized and provided, you know, after a conversation, or whether it's upon receiving email communication. But they really like that. One of the areas, you know, that they've kind of honed in on as well whenever looking at our policy is that there is some opportunities where not only that all members of council maybe not be required to provide circulation. And I think we've identified it also in our staff report. So there's, for example, we do have a couple of items. The one that comes top of mind is a notice of motion. For example, if a member of council comes to clerk services, requires assistance with a notice of motion, we wouldn't be circulating all of council with that individual member's notice of motion as we're working through drafts. And right now, our existing policy is actually explicit, saying everything that's communicated is generally provided to all members of council. So that was one clear line that they had indicated that we made some change to.
And I
Follow up? Yeah.
Yes, if I may, please. And I believe you mentioned that Appendix 1, the clarification for councillors of private information and such is another additional. Is that something that came from their suggestions as well, or that just a normal course of examination?
And through the Vice Chair, to address that question, I can confirm that that was from the recommended council staff relations policy. That was a recommendation of the judicial inquiry.
Okay. So just to close off, I share the same concerns that, as I said, that Councillor Jeffrey brought forward. So I'm prepared to go along with the idea of providing input. I think the basis of what you're saying, Councillor Jeffrey, is you'd like to see it shortened and maybe a little more bullet pointed and such, and that seems to fit with where I'm at too with it. So I can leave it at that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, Vice Chair. Although I'm sympathetic to Councillor Jeffrey's comments, when I go through this with a red pencil, I really don't see much that, in my opinion, would strengthen this by revising it or deleting any of the points. It may be a little overkill, but under the circumstances of what Collingwood's been through, I'd rather have overkill than underkill, if you excuse the expression. So I'm certainly prepared to support your 2-week deferral on this, but the onus would be back to you with a red pencil, I suppose, to come back to us with suggested revisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor.
Am I on here? Yeah. Okay, thanks. I spent a little bit of time, and it's pretty much all over the map as far as I can tell. Some municipalities have literally 5 subsections, and that's their whole policy. Many municipalities incorporate this into a I think what they call like a corporate policy document, and in it they have the code of conduct, procedural bylaw, and staff council relationship. And I have to say, I sort of like that idea, because I know there's certain things in here that I believe staff has sort of worked around because they don't want to conflict it with our procedural bylaw. And I know this is more work, but I sort of wish it was all in one place so we don't have to be going back and forth to different documents, because if you're me, I have hard enough time finding them on the website anyway. But that aside, So that's sort of my overall thought. I wouldn't mind if it was all in one place, and then maybe this would be a lot shorter because you could just have section 11, the policy governing the relationship, which should be pretty straightforward. My sort of larger concern, and it's as the position of mayor or who's standing in the mayor's position, is that the policy doesn't recognize the role of mayor as CEO. And the Municipal Act says that in addition to being head of council and chairing meetings and doing all the things the mayor is supposed to do vis-a-vis the members, the mayor also as CEO has to, and I'm just looking here, act as representative of the municipality, both within the municipality, outside the municipality, promote the municipality locally, nationally, internationally, participate in and foster activities that enhance the economic, social, and environmental well-being of the municipality and its residents. And you're thinking, why is she telling me all this? It's because of the clause in the policy that says that any direction to staff to carry out a specific task or function should not happen unless council's taken a vote. And so I have found myself, because I believe this is in our procedural bylaw, something similar, going off to a meeting where I wish I had a briefing or some background information, and council didn't vote on that. And in, my role as CEO, going out in the community or meeting with business people, sometimes I need information that maybe all of it doesn't need to go to council because you're not attending that meeting. I've been working with staff and they've been great. But I sort of feel the more rules we have, the more constricted. And it was not, I'm here for the next 3 years, like people after me, or, we don't know how all this will unfold, of course, in the future. But I sort of think that role and the support staff needs to give to a person sitting in the position of mayor should be recognized in here, that the mayor might need more support, more research, that kind of thing. So anyway, I didn't come here with any words that I thought would address that, but I just have that sort of overall nagging feeling something more needs to be there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Any other comments? Councillor Ring.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair. And this is just a question, if I may, through you to Chair Jeffries. When you're saying about you're not asking to take a whole lot out of it. You just want to have it in point form, so it's not quite as big a document, and it's a little easier to look up than trying to read paragraph after paragraph that's kind of repeating itself in a lot of cases. Is that the case?
I think there's so through you, Vice Chair. I think there's the high points, the main principles of our relationship that need to be covered, and however if we want those examples to follow into an appendix, that would be great. Because they can be there for examples, and you don't have to change the policy every time if the example changes. But I was thinking something a little shorter. I just think it's almost like we're trying too hard. We don't need to, and really in response also to the mayor's comments, I believe the mayor does need that support, but Justice Morocco also said that I believe he said it was unfortunate that that description of CEO appeared in the Municipal Act there, and that it needed to be changed because it was misused or misperceived going forward. So to define that might be a great role. But again, some of these things are all covered off in other places, because what I said to Clerk Almus the other day, what's not acknowledged in this staff and council relationship is the fact that the CAO has a dual responsibility. She has a responsibility to ensure the council has the most objective, best information to make their decision independent, but also she has the role to lead staff to ensure they implement what our final decision is based on that objective information they supplied, whether we agreed with them or we didn't. So that's not covered, but I think it's a critical piece for us as a staff and council relationship. But it too is stated somewhere else. So I think the mayor makes a good point. And what is the way that we can pull this all together without duplicating and having such a huge document that it's just really unmanageable for something that I think is really common sense for the most part, and just respect, and you earn trust. You just aren't automatically given trust. That's something you earn. Thank you.
Mayor?
The judicial inquiry that commented on the fact that, it's too bad the mayor's given the powers of a CEO in the Municipal Act, and he did recommend that come out, but the province has not taken up that job. And in fact, they're doubling down on the role of the mayor and expanding strong mayor powers. So I think for the purposes of this document, we shouldn't be assuming that that role is going to change at this point. So I just wanted to offer that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just make sure that no one else. Okay, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. We've touched into the area that just shows how difficult this is. It's a case of where, in my personal opinion, we don't need it. This council sitting at the table right now. I sit there and say to myself, so do I need to put something together for future councils? I'm struggling with that. I do believe that eventually the province will address the Municipal Act for a revision. I have no crystal ball to figure out when that would happen. And I do believe that that particular area will be strongly looked at. Don't disagree for a second that in the interim, it sure appears to actually be going in the reverse, as you mentioned, about the strong mayor situations. But in any event, I'm at this stage. I'm still at that. I can't support it going forward as is. I think there's a lot of great work in it, and I don't want to see that go to the wayside either. But I just think there's other documents that say particular things that cover what we need covered. So at this stage, that's where I'm at with it.
Thank you, CAO.
Thank you very much. Just from a staff perspective, if I could say a couple of words. This is a very important policy, especially in Collingwood. And because we had the judicial inquiry and some of the things that had triggered the need for an inquiry did involve the relationship between staff and council. It's one that we're leaders in the province and having put one into place quickly. And that's, an updated version of that is what you see in front of you today. And I think the one that we have right now does constrain the relationships between staff and council, not the one we've proposed, the one that is in effect until you vote and change it. It constrains the relationships between staff and council and how we can have good conversations. And also there is a recognition that there is some supports required for the mayor that we've tried to recognize in this updated version. In part, in some cases, that's related to what is in the current policy around who gets CC'd on everything and direction from all of council. And in part, that's constrained by the number of resources that we do have currently available. So things like that we may be able to help to address during the budget conversations with council. We have taken our staff stab at it. If you do wish that another, as is proposed in the amendment, another try at what should be within the policy is taken, it would be very helpful that the process included something where the members' suggestions on what is most important and how you'd like to see that relationship play out over the rest of your term. And as the deputy mayor mentioned, very importantly for future councils, because you are, I think, a leader in Ontario in setting out like how these relationships should work. One of the things that's always hard as a CAO is that we're somewhat constrained by wanting to do our best for everybody. We want to lead the staff and we want to actually set the town up to achieve what the council has said is our strategic directions. So in many cases, it's policies like this that we use to figure out how the resources are allocated and how we reply and to whom and how quickly and those kinds of things. So knowing what you want and being really clear on that is important to staff. And I think it'll set us up for a really positive, a continuing positive relationship moving forward. And much thanks to Clerk Almas, who's done a great amount of research on various versions of this policy, and I know is open to the conversation with council.
Thank you, CAO. Any other comments? Hey, actually, I will just add that I am in agreement generally with the remarks that have been made here, that it has the appearance of being an overly onerous document. I do like the chair's words of building walls. Not that that was the intent, but that could be the net effect, especially I think for newer members of council. I also agree with the notion of a consolidation of this document with our code of conduct, procedural bylaw. So I would be in support, Chair, of your motion to refer this back. Thank you.
Okay, and may I, Vice Chair, just ask, just procedurally, if we, just what's going to work best in terms of supporting Clerk Almas and the information we need to move this forward, is that we would refer it back on the understanding that all of us are going to take 2 weeks to submit. But I mean, I don't think I should be writing. I don't think any individual council member should be writing this, but I think the clerk should be hearing us as to what it is we want. So I don't know if it's a deferral or a referral, but we'll all take 2 weeks to submit to the clerk our, if that's the intent, then to submit to the clerk our priorities and how this can be bundled to make it user-friendly.
Thank you. Clerk, could you help us out on that one?
Certainly. Thank you, Vice Chair. I think too, being in my 20th year with the town of Collingwood and enduring the inquiry pieces as well, that you can go from simplicity, then you go overboard. So I can definitely tell that there's a need to be more concise, and I'm wondering if I'm receiving any feedback from members of council, if the direction is, if the clerk together with any comments received from council could look at consolidating it so we can work together, staff internally, together with receiving any input that we have from council. So it's not just council saying this is the specific things, because based on what I've heard today, I know that there's areas that, I could definitely see, could be a little bit more succinct and work within the framework you're looking at. I know consolidating it as one document, obviously the Municipal Act requires separate policies. You're required to have specific procedural bylaw, you're required to have a specific council staff relations policy. So it can't be the same document, but we can make it concise and maybe with appropriate links to the other documents that have the relative piece. So you're not having to go back and forth either as a council member, a staff member, or a member of public looking at the policy. So maybe if the motion is that council defer the staff report, it may take longer than 2 weeks, but bring it back not later than the end of October. We can definitely do something within that time frame. If council provides that direction to bring it back not later than October, with staff together with any comments from council, look at doing a more consolidated, succinct version of the policy.
Terrific. So
Yes.
that's
So
your motion.
That will be my motion.
I'll second
Okay.
that.
Okay. And sorry, Deputy Mayor. Okay, so we have a seconder in Mayor Hamlin. Closing comments?
I just want to say that I greatly appreciate the efforts of the clerk in this regard. She touched on being here for 20 years, and she's taken on a tremendous amount of responsibility to take what was learned at the inquiry and try to incorporate it into the ongoing policies of the corporation, and that is no small task. And I just cannot say enough how much appreciation I have for the efforts that you put forward, and certainly didn't want to imply anything by suggesting that I thought the document needed some work. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So if there are no further comments, I will call the vote. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. We'll turn it back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair. Well done. Okay. So I'm just going to check in. Maureen, are you ready to go? Yeah. Okay. Please, pleased to invite our deputy this evening, Maureen Basnicki, and we'll have Maureen do her presentation with respect to Service Day.
Is this on?
You're ready to go.
I'm ready to go. If I forget upon my presentation to say this, I must say it right now. I'm here to promote National Day of Service, which has been legislated as a provincial day of service as well. And having just sat here the last half hour listening to you, I'd like to remind you all that you're serving your community big time. And it sounds like you have many difficult decisions to make. And I'm here to thank you very much for your daily tasks that you continue to do on the behalf of your community. I'm also wanting to thank you for having me. I'm not prepared with a formal presentation. My son, Brennan, was supposed to be here. And as luck would have it, he has many media personalities after him, and he's handling the public right now. I myself, I'm here without a PowerPoint presentation. I am speaking to you through my heart, which is very heavy today because, of course, 22 years ago, I lost my best friend and my beloved husband, Ken Basnicki. And I won't keep referring to him as my late husband because I want to mention him often. He is one of the main reasons why I have pursued this passion of creating a proper legacy, not only for Ken, who is a Canadian, but also for the Canadian 9/11 families that perished on 9/11. And I want to tell you that it was very, very important to me to discuss Service Day with you because Collingwood is my home. It was my temporary home, as so many other Torontonians made it. We were weekend warriors and came up here regularly on the weekends. And I met Ken on North Winds Beach, as a matter of fact. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. And we've had a few residences here, but it was our dream home that we built in Montera subdivision that we were very, very proud of. It took us 2 years, and that was the year 1999 and the year 2000 when we decided that this was going to be our permanent home. It was going to be a place where we could invite our children and our grandchildren, and what a wonderful community to live and play, which is what we did for the entire time that we were here. In fact, it was when I was living in Montara that the 9/11 attacks occurred. And before I go further on that, I would like to say that it was 6 weeks to the day afterwards that I lost my closest girlfriend, Barb Kennedy, to the battle of breast cancer. And so I have to refresh your memory. I found myself in a position of wanting to honor both my girlfriend Barb and my husband Ken, two horrific events for me, but also for the communities. We've all lost loved ones to cancer, it seems. But you're looking at the founder of the event called Tits and Glitz. It was it was a very successful event. Some of you probably remember it. I think Deb does. Councillor Doherty does quite well. And people said to me, "Well, Maureen, you just can't do that. You can't have an event that celebrates womanhood, and be positive and with such a horrific disease." And I said, I think we can. And I think I live in a community that will help me do that. So an itty bitty titty committee was formed, and we had great fun planning this event that was attended by over 1,000 women and raised over $100,000. So after completing that, I decided, okay, now how do I reframe 9/11? When I say 9/11, you think of the hate and the horror of that day, the most evil of mankind that took the lives of almost 3,000 people, 24 which are Canadians. And at this point, too, I want to mention that you will often just hear me speaking in Canada because most of the Canadians that perished that day lived in the United States. But they support me 100% of my efforts in Canada. Living in the States made them no less Canadians, but they have a different way of marking events in the U.S. And of course, today, if you turn on the television, you'll see a very solemn event that's necessary for many family members. And I don't certainly judge other family members, but I thought, no, I just don't want the terrorists to win. I don't want the bad guys to frame the day. As a former flight attendant with Air Canada, it really bothered me to see the planes fly into the buildings. I still have to see that, but I thought, why? This was an attack on our values. And I'm very, very proud of the values that we have here in Canada, that we share in the United States. As a matter of fact, over 92 countries lost citizens that day, but Canada has their own way of demonstrating their strength and their humanity. And I don't have to remind you that we can be very, very proud of the way Canada reacted that day. And I specifically have to mention Newfoundland, Gander, and surrounding communities. Many of you will have seen Come From Away. I'm happy to say that I've been adopted by the Come From Away family. I didn't land on the morning of September 11th. I was on a layover in my capacity as a flight attendant in Germany. But it made me very proud when I eventually got home to realize how my country responded to the events of that day. And I went to the then Prime Minister, shortly afterwards, when I had the capability of knowing my own name and wanting to make a difference and wanting to reframe the day. By this time, the Conservative government was in power, and I remember approaching the former Prime Minister Stephen Harper and saying, "We must not let the bad guys win. We have to find a way to define it in Canada." And so I'm happy to say that he actually understood my passion. And it wasn't until 10 years later that he and his cabinet, of course, were able to, through actually was through the Senate, declare through the Senate that the anniversary of September 11th would be a National Day of Service. However, I found after the years, it didn't get much notice, unfortunately. So then a year and a half ago, I went to our provincial government and I said, you know, the years are passing and our young people don't know much about the events of 9/11, and they should. It's a global event, and it was an event that attacked our values, and I can't let anybody forget, especially in the country that I love, which is Canada. And lo and behold, MPP Lauren Coe came to me and said, Maureen, I'd like to present this to our legislature, and I'd like to read a few words that he said. It would be a year and a half ago, the spring of last year. On September 11th, we have the opportunity to not only thank all the volunteers who give up their time, put their skills to work, demonstrate acts of kindness and compassion, and willingly make sacrifices to better the lives of others, but also all Ontarians who give back in any way they can. Speaker, let the Provincial Day of Service truly be a day that serves as an inspiration to rise to the occasion, which celebrates generosity and allows us to reflect on the importance of Ontarians coming together for the best of our province and, yes, our country. We honor the courage of those who put themselves in harm's way to save people they never knew, and vow to honor them by serving our communities in the way in which they so selflessly serve. We come together this afternoon in gratitude for the strength that has fortified us across these 21 years, and we renew the love and the faith that bind us together as one Ontario and Canadian family. Bill 51, the Provincial Day of Service Act, will also honor the selfless service of civilian and military, volunteers who continue to stand up in the face of terrorism, and the outpouring of Canadian support in the aftermath of the attacks. In response, over 40,000 Canadian Armed Forces members would deploy to Afghanistan between 2001 and 2014. More than 150 Canadian soldiers died during the 13 campaign, and thousands were wounded physically and psychologically. So I want to say that I did succeed with the help of many others, Wounded Warriors Canada especially, to have this act pass. And today, I don't want people to dwell on the hate and horror. I want you to remember the families in a most compassionate and sensitive way, and that's by doing acts of service, committing to acts of service, volunteering, an act of kindness, whatever. We all have our own way, and it's important in Collingwood, which is the home that I chose to be in. It's a place where Ken taught soccer to the kids, coached, that is, skiing. He was a true community service gentleman. And I think the world needs more Canadians, that is K-E-N, Canadians, and the world needs more communities like Collingwood, a very, very giving community. And I hope you will join me in annually remembering on this day, not only those who were fallen, but support the living and recognize the day by acts of service. Thank you very much.
My goodness, Maureen, thank you so much for your presentation today. And the passion, and I know all of us are, our thoughts are with everyone, and especially with you today. And we really love the fact that you are able to, to use your wording, reframe this into something positive for not just our community, but our country. And so congratulations on that. And I would just turn to look at the committee members to see if there are any questions or comments.
Oh, please do if you want to ask a question. I'd like to acknowledge too, Michelle Lalonde, who's my media personnel, shall we say. My computer skills are lacking some days, so she's helping me out. We do have a website. It's serviceday.ca. And I'd like to share with you that I believe the CN Tower is going to be lit up tonight. Nice. In red, white, and blue. Next year, I think Niagara Falls is going to join us. So I respectfully ask, I believe it was decided that the clock tower be lit up this evening. And I do hope that this will be on an annual basis. Mm-hmm. And that we can be prepared, especially for the 25th anniversary. Mm-hmm. Okay. Are there any questions?
I don't see any. You've done such a fabulous job. I don't think there's anything left we could ask.
Thank you.
We know how to support you. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you again for having me.
Okay.
Did you change your mind?
Yeah, it's been covered.
I didn't have a question. I just was going to say that we happen to be recognizing our volunteers this week. On Thursday, we're having a viewing of a movie at the Simcoe Theatre, and then next week the Trails Committee is recognizing their volunteers. So it's the message is out there, and I believe that it's the positive focus that you've brought on to the idea of let's celebrate our strengths.
Thank you. There is a movement, because it is Legislative Day, to have some of our recognition days on Service Day. In fact, the Rotary Club their motto is service above self. And they're working right now on perhaps across our nation to do something to honor the day. It can never be forgotten. And what better message can we give the bad guys in that you're not going to win? Thank you.
That's excellent. Thank you very much. So with that, so special. Okay. So we'll move on to 5.2 in our staff reports. And that's with respect to C 2023-18, the taxi ride sharing licensing service review. And Deputy Mayor Fryer is going to recuse. Mm-hmm. Yep. Absolutely. Clerk Elmas, it's your show.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Jeffrey. So I'll just be very quick here in saying that this is a long-awaited licensing review of taxis and rideshare, and I will turn it right over to Manager Adam Herod.
Welcome, Adam.
Good afternoon, Chair Jeffrey, members of council, staff, and members of the public that are here today. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to present a short presentation on the staff report that you have in front of you called the Taxi Licensing Bylaw and Ride Share Review. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the report is to report back to council regarding the town's taxi licensing program, as well as ride sharing services, which are also known as transportation network companies, or TNCs for short. Ultimately, staff are seeking council approval to authorize the elimination of the town's taxi licensing program effectively January 1st, 2024, in an attempt to lessen the financial and administrative barriers to improve the equity within the local taxi and rideshare industry. Next slide, please. So just a background on taxis. First of all, what are taxi cabs? So simply put, these are motor vehicles that have seating capacity of not more than seven persons that are available for hire for the transportation of the public. Within the town of Collingwood, taxi cab owners and drivers are currently regulated under bylaw 2010-064, which is the town's business licensing bylaw. Within this bylaw, there are numerous regulations which set out, among other things, annual licensing requirements and conditions for both the taxi owners and drivers. It also sets out annual rates that taxi cabs are permitted to charge to customers. And these rates are subject to increases based on the consumer price index and changes to that, and have also been discussed periodically through ad hoc requests from the sole taxi company operating in town. In terms of accessible taxi services, the town recently entered into a contract with Ace Cabs to provide on-demand accessible transit service using accessible taxi cabs. This 2-year contract will continue irrespective of any decision that's made going forward. It's also worth mentioning that the province recently enacted Ontario Regulation 418/21. This regulation applies to taxi cabs, limousines, and private transportation companies in instances where there are no specific regulations that exist for municipally licensed passenger vehicles, and where the companies are not operating wholly within a single municipality. Next slide. So in terms of the town's taxi licensing program, the town has been regulating taxi cabs since 2002. The Bylaw Services Division is responsible for administering and enforcing the taxi licensing program. However, the division has been facing resource constraints and have limited capacity to dedicate to this program. In terms of program overview, for obtaining a new taxi license, it is quite costly. So to initially, somebody looking to obtain a license would have to pay $5,580 per vehicle, plus $170 a year for that vehicle to renew. Vehicles over 5 years are also subject to additional fees. So that's just for the operators or owners of the taxi companies. In terms of the driver requirements, there is an initial fee for the drivers themselves, which is $90 or $70 for renewal. The drivers themselves also have to obtain a criminal record check and provide a driver's abstract. And obviously these are costly as well for the individual drivers. Since the town does not have any regulations for TNCs, they're not obviously subject to these licensing requirements. We've also seen a decline in the number of taxi cab owner licenses, as well as the number of drivers within the last 2 to 3 years. Unfortunately, the existing regulatory framework and costs associated with obtaining a license have resulted in minimal public interest in acquiring any of the available licenses. So right now there's a cap on the number of taxi cab owner licenses, 1 vehicle per 465 households, which works out to about 30 vehicles. And right now I believe we're at 13 vehicles. As such, Ace Cab has been and continues to be the sole company offering taxi services within the town of Collingwood. Next slide, please. So with the advent of the transportation network companies, the taxi industry is grappling with several difficulties. Some of these challenges include increases in insurance and fuel costs, the classification of drivers as employees rather than independent contractors. TNCs are also not subject to the same municipal licensing fees and regulations, leading to an unbalanced competitive landscape. There's also challenges with recruitment and retention of drivers and outdated regulations which can hinder innovation and progress. So these challenges hinder the competitiveness of taxi cabs, and as such, bring about a call for deregulation, which could potentially alleviate some of the industry pressures. Next slide, please. So in terms of ride sharing and TNCs, with the recent technological advancements, they've obviously brought about innovative platforms and software that can facilitate a new form of transportation among users. Companies like Uber and Lyft are the primary providers of such ride-sharing services. And ride-sharing services are part of the expanding economy and peer-to-peer platform to connect passengers with individuals who use their personal vehicles to provide transportation services. Again, these services are not currently regulated or licensed by the town. So the rise of ride-sharing services has demonstrated that many customers value convenience, price transparency, and the ability to rate drivers over traditional taxi services that may not offer these same features. Next slide. So in terms of kind of a business model comparison, so this slide just demonstrates the comparison of local taxis and TNCs and their business models. So the town currently is responsible for screening taxi drivers as part of the licensing process. Taxi drivers operate commercial vehicles, which are arranged by phone, online, or hailed on the street. Taxis rely on online reviews and offer various payment methods. And their fares are regulated by the town and are subject to fee service changes. On the other hand, transportation network companies are responsible for screening their drivers who operate personal vehicles to transport passengers for a fee. Rides and payments are arranged through an app, which can offer dynamic pricing. And these ride-sharing platforms also have a rating system that enables passengers and drivers to rate each other. Next slide, please. So we conducted a survey, which is part of the report with the various municipalities to understand their approach towards taxi licensing. So this survey, we were able to get results from 9 municipalities. Of the 9 municipalities, 1 municipality licenses taxi cab owners and TNCs only, so they don't regulate any drivers. 2 have revised and updated their programs in an attempt to remove unnecessary and outdated regulations. 3 do not regulate at all, and 3 are currently in the process of updating and or removing regulations completely. So having said that, staff have developed various options for council's consideration. So next slide, please. So option 1 would be to discontinue taxi licensing program. So staff are recommending this approach. This option would not have any financial impacts and would require council to revoke the town's licensing bylaw. Deregulation can facilitate a healthy competitive competition between taxis and TNCs, as open market can provide entry, rapid innovation, and adaption, and can create allow consumers to have more options when it comes to pricing. It would also allow taxi companies to set fares as they feel that are appropriate based on their business model. Additionally, there are opportunities to encourage the use of the new on-demand transit service and other local transportation options. In the absence of regulations, both transportation services would be captured under the various provincial statutes and regulations. And ultimately, the onus would fall on the public to ensure that the taxi and ride-sharing services are reputable and have standards for drivers and vehicles. What I will say for option number 2, just because there may not be any municipal regulations, other laws still continue to apply, like the Highway Traffic Act, the Consumer Protection and Promotion Act. They obviously apply. Consumers can also protect themselves in other ways, such as using reviews and ratings, trusting their instincts, and just in general using good judgment. So option 2 would see the town continuing to regulate taxis only. This option would not put taxis and ride-sharing services on equal footing. It is anticipated that the cost for delivering this option would range between $10,500 to $23,000. This would obviously be subject to the regulations that are developed. And this cost would include the necessary updates to the bylaw, public consultation, targeted stakeholder meetings, legal review, compliance monitoring and enforcing, and ongoing program review. And then finally, the third option would be to regulate both taxis and TNCs. This option ensures that the regulations are fair and do not favor either taxi providers or ride-sharing platforms. If council was supportive of this option, staff would recommend an overhaul to the existing taxi licensing program and bylaw to determine options for a more streamlined approach. This option is expected to cost between $18,000 to $31,000, depending on the regulations, and may require additional staffing or funding to help lead this project, as there's limited capacity within the bylaw services division. Next slide. So in an effort to remove the financial and administrative burdens on the taxi industry associated with regulating and licensing, as well as encouraging open market competition, affordable rates, redistribution of limited resources required to manage the program to other municipal priorities, and to continue to support and promote the current enhanced local transit opportunities, staff are recommending that the taxi licensing program be ended effectively January 1st, 2024. And that is it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so we'll just note that the deputy mayor is recusing himself for the discussion, but first we'll see if there's anyone in the gallery wishing to speak to the staff report. And seeing none, then I'll have the clerk check with our online participants.
Thank you, Chair Jeffrey. If there's any remote attendees wishing to address the committee of the whole regarding the staff report, please press the raise your hand feature. Not at this time, Your Worship.
Okay. All right, so our motion is that staff report C 2023-18 titled Taxi Licensing Bylaw and Rideshare Review be received, and that council authorize the elimination of taxi regulation effective January 1st, 2024 to lessen the financial and administrative barriers and improve equity within the local taxi and rideshare industry, while continuing to promote the use of our enhanced municipal transit opportunities, including the contract with Ace Transportation Group, Inc., Ace Cabs, for accessible taxi service, and that council directs staff to provide notice to the local taxi operator industry, Collingwood Police, and the public. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Perry, Councillor Ring, and those wishing to speak, ask questions. Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a very well written and reasoned recommendation and report. I support it wholeheartedly. I know of a number of bike rental facilities in town, and we don't regulate them, and nor should we. I really don't understand the rationale, not just here, but elsewhere in Ontario, why we regulate a free enterprise service like this. So I'm all in support of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Doherty, do you have a comment?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have brought this matter up, I think, every budget for last number of budget reviews, that there's something fundamentally out of sync with what is happening in our modern world today. That the sharing society now is the norm, and taxi drivers are unduly weighted down with these kinds of regulations and in particular fees. So I'm very much in support of this motion and very glad to see this staff report come forward.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else with comments? Yes, Mary Hamlin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, thank you for bringing this report forward. I agree with the comments that have been made. It doesn't make sense to regulate just one part of the industry that is serving our community by providing rides. I do have a few questions about whether we should be regulating all of these personal transportation providers. Because I'm just having this, worry that should we be making sure that all the vehicles that are operating in our community meet safety checks or are, have sufficient insurance or what have you. And one of the points I thought I saw mentioned, and this is through you, Madam Chair, is that if the person providing the private transportation is operating outside of our municipality, in other words, for example, they pick up someone in Thornbury and drop them in Collingwood, can we regulate them in any event, or do they have to be operating solely within our municipality for us to regulate them? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, and through Chair Jeffrey to Mayor Hamlin. Technically, the town would be only able to regulate those fares that are starting in Collingwood, and if the drivers are picking up elsewhere in Thornbury or another community, they would have to have regulations themselves. In terms of vehicle safety and standards, if there are no regulations that exist within the municipality and you have a taxi company that's offering services in more than one community, there is the regulation that was recently enacted under the Highway Traffic Act relating to public transportation services. The Highway Traffic Act also sets out a number of requirements for individuals in terms of maintenance of their vehicles. There are regulations out there that exist that would potentially apply if there were no regulations.
I have a few more questions.
Keep going.
Thank you. I'm wondering, if we were to rely on the provincial regulation, can we have any impact in terms of spot checks being done in our community on these vehicles?
Through the chair to Mayor Hamlin, possibly through like a request through the Police Services Board. I'm not familiar with how that request would be made.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't get a chance to send my questions ahead of time. I didn't mean to catch you off guard. Sorry, just
the CEO just wanted to add to that, if you don't mind.
Just wanted to add, thank you via the chair, also to Mayor Hamlin. There are two ministries at a minimum, probably more, that do the checks that you're mentioning. The Ministry of the Environment does some, and largely larger trucks, though, not the taxis as much. And of course, MTO. And outside of the Police Services Board, I do believe that we could also request that they do spot checks. They do have compliance blitzes from time to time. You may have heard of one or more in your time as a council representative. So there's some ability, but it is always at their decision, not ours.
Okay, thank you. And my last question is, do you have any idea, through you, Madam Chair, how many of alternative personal vehicles, whatever they're called, there are in our town now, like outside of the cab company?
so through the chair to Mayor Hamlin, we did contact one prominent company, Uber, when we were developing it. Unfortunately, because of their kind of business details, they want to keep things private. They didn't want us to kind of provide that information in public. But I will say they have a lot of drivers.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. I had asked actually Councillor Hamlin's question to my FCM colleagues a few years ago in terms of that having empty taxi cabs coming back or going to for the pickups and the drop-offs, because the license was only good in one or the other for one way. And she just looked at me like I said, well, that's why we have regional taxi regulation. We have regional so that they can travel within the region. So they're monitored by region as opposed to by municipality. So that was their answer to that. But it's not sustainable to have a vehicle going empty one way and coming back, especially when there's lineups of people who want to be able to use the taxi cabs. And I do know I've received a lot of complaints lately that they're unable to get cabs. The cost of the cabs are unbelievable. So I'm assuming that this decision we're making here is definitely going to assist with being able to reduce, I hope, the taxi cab costs if we're eliminating quite a bit of money out of their budget in terms of, I mean, if you have 13 taxi cabs at $55.80, that's like $65,000 or so that an assist in your budget. So so that's good. So I really don't have any questions, only comments to say, what are we going to do with all those hours in bylaw? And have you got anything planned, like
so
enforcement of STAs maybe?
Yeah. So to the chair, certainly there are some hours that are dedicated to this program. I wouldn't say there's a significant amount of hours. I think in the staff report, it was I think I said between 60 and 70 hours. So not a lot. And based on current numbers, obviously, if it was expanded, there would be more time that would need to be put into it. So certainly STAs is a big priority for the bylaw services division. And we will continue to focus our efforts on that program.
Okay. I was being a little facetious, but I knew you have lots of places to use those hours. All right. So if there's yes, Mary Helen.
I'm going to support the motion that's on the floor, as I mentioned. But I would like to add one item to it, if I can get a seconder for it, which would be that by the end of 2024, staff report back on what the other municipalities are doing that they've canvassed already in terms of regulating these personal transportation vehicles, and also whether there's an appetite to do an approach with the other municipalities in South Georgian Bay that would do what I would call a minimum regulation in terms of such things as criminal checks for the drivers, vehicle safety, insurance requirements, and I'm sure there's other things on staff's mind. Those are for examples. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You've got that wording. Okay, Clerk Thomas, and a seconder is Vice Chair. No, a seconder. Councillor Perry. All right, speaking to the amendment. Councillor Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Just in general, I believe that when an individual signs up with Uber or Lyft to be a driver, I believe that they have to provide that information to Uber and Lyft to get on their roster, as it were. That's my understanding of how it works. So I'm not sure whether we need to do that follow-up or not.
Okay. Maybe less specifically, Mayor Hamlin, would you be interested in hearing back on I don't know how it's working in the community, how the results have come in other communities, kind of a status update on where they're at. More generically as opposed to anything specific to. Is that doable? Clerk's nodding her head.
Yeah, I just, what's on my mind is I know some municipalities are putting this extra layer of vehicle checks, criminal checks, age requirements, and I don't know that we should be relying on a private company making sure that that's in place. So I wouldn't change my motion. Because especially since I see some of the municipalities that were identified for us are now looking at these regulations. So I'd like to have an update on all of it.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right. So that's the end of 2024?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So if there's no other comments with respect to the amendment, I'll just call the vote. All those in favor? I'll just wait for the mayor to have her card up. There we go. So those, I saw that, and those opposed. And that is carried. Thank you. You almost took your mic out there, Mayor. Yes. Oh, sorry. I have to vote on the motion as amended, so there's more comments allowed.
Sorry, through you, Chair, to the manager. I'm interested to know, did Ace Cabs make any comment or deposition in regard to this motion that we're bringing forward? You would think that they would be interested one way or the other.
Clerk Almus will speak to that.
Thank you, through the chair. We did have a conversation with Ace Cabs, and they have indicated that the overall complete challenges in the taxi industry are affecting their operations, obviously, they would support reduced fees if that was something that we were looking at. However, they're looking at their overall business model themselves. They were aware and watching and keep apprised of council agendas and knowing that this was coming forward. So that's all the comment I'll make.
Okay. Thank you for that. All right. So there's no other comments. Then we'll vote on the motion as amended. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. All right, which brings us to item 5.3, P 2023-25, 136 Pine Street, the Heritage Demolition Permit. And welcome back, Deputy Mayor. So we'll turn it over to Director Valentine to introduce. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the interest of time, we're content to move directly to Mr. Teagle's presentation, noting that I'm certainly available to assist with addressing questions and comments, and the applicant's agent is also present here today in the gallery. I would, however, note that this is the first time that you have Mr. Teagle before you today in his new role as a senior planner. You will recall that he was successful in the recruitment to backfill Mr. Bryan's position when he left the municipality. And I would just like to indicate that we are so thrilled that Justin has chosen to continue and grow his career with the town of Collingwood. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Welcome, Senior Planner Teagle.
All right. Good afternoon, committee members. So this is the staff presentation for staff report P 2023-25 regarding a heritage permit for demolition at 136 Pine Street. Next slide, please. So 136 Pine Street is located within the Collingwood Downtown Heritage Conservation District, or the district designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Property is located on the west side of Pine Street, approximately mid-block between 2nd Street to the north and 3rd Street to the south. An existing one-story commercial building is located on the subject property and was most recently occupied by Georgian Bay Wet Cleaners and is now unoccupied. Alterations to the exterior properties and demolition in the district require issuance of a heritage permit per bylaw 2022-037, being a bylaw in relation to heritage permits. Issuance of a permit for demolition is not staff delegated and is a decision of council. Next slide, please. This is the front elevation of the subject property and the parking lot out front shown on the slides there. On July 5th, 2023, the property owner submitted a heritage permit application accompanied with a heritage impact assessment, or HIA, requesting to demolish the existing commercial building. While no redevelopment concept has been provided, it should be noted that any new development on the property will require Planning Act applications, including site plan control, as well as a heritage permit for new construction. No site plan control or other Planning Act applications have been submitted at this time. An HIA of any redevelopment proposal is a standard requirement for redevelopment within the district and would be required to accompany any Planning Act application that may be filed. Next slide, please. So these slides show the side elevations on the screen. In considering a demolition proposed in the district, the direction of the inventory needs to be taken into consideration, and a thorough assessment of the property through an HIA needs to be undertaken. The Collingwood Downtown Heritage Conservation District plan or district plan objectives for heritage buildings include to apply exceptional measures to avoid demolition or removal of heritage buildings, to apply the provisions of the Ontario Heritage Act to control the demolition or removal of a heritage building or structure. The overall objectives for the district note the heritage character of the district is largely based on an inventory of buildings built between 1850 and 1920. The heritage attributes are the elements of the district that are important for the preservation of the district's heritage value. Heritage attributes of the district include 2- and 3-story commercial buildings built within that time period noted, with similar materials, primarily brick, scale, form, and architectural details. The district plan does not detail the heritage value of individual buildings or properties and whether on their own they make a contribution to the heritage character or understanding of the district. Next slide, please. These slides, the images show the rear elevations of the subject property. So the current district plan states that the Collingwood Downtown Heritage Conservation District inventory of buildings, or the inventory from 2002, should continue to be used as a source of information and description about individual properties within the district. The inventory provides the following comment on the property. So the 1-story twin-gabled aluminum-clad masonry commercial building with simple full-width front porch at grade circa 1930. And says that the building was formerly a garage, and this older structure lies within, presumably, though it's not believed to be of any intrinsic importance. And future development here could be proposed with a multi-story parking perhaps behind, being appropriate on this less prominent site. So based on the assessment of the inventory, it appears that this commercial building was not considered to make a significant contribution to the heritage character of the district, and therefore its demolition would not represent a loss to the heritage district's heritage attributes. Next slide, please. The HIA submitted or heritage impact assessment submitted by the applicant in terms of its conclusions. So in addition to the inventory, an HIA was undertaken by the owners. With regard to its conclusions, it found that site visit and historical research undertaken for this report confirmed that the subject property and building do not retain heritage value and do not contribute to an understanding of the Collingwood Downtown Heritage Conservation District. As such, the demolition of the building will not result in any negative impacts to the cultural heritage value of the Collingwood Downtown Heritage Conservation District. The findings of the HIA are consistent with the commentary in the inventory from 2002, which was doubtful of the heritage value of the existing commercial building and noted the property as a suitable candidate for redevelopment in accordance with the district plan. Next slide, please. So in terms of the Heritage Committee's recommendation, based on the comments contained in the inventory and the findings of the HIA, staff and the Heritage Committee are supportive of issuance of a heritage permit for demolition of the existing property, subject to the condition that site plan control approval be obtained prior to demolition works occurring. The heritage permit for demolition was reviewed by the Heritage Committee on July 17th, 2023. Heritage Committee ratified the July minutes at their meeting on September 7th, and those minutes will be on the council agenda for September 25th. But the recommendation made at the July meeting, which is consistent with the staff recommendation, was firstly that the Collingwood Heritage Committee received the HIA for 136 Pine Street, and that Collingwood Heritage Committee recommend approval of the heritage permit to demolish the existing building located at 136 Pine Street. And second, that as a condition of the heritage permit, site plan control approval shall be obtained prior to undertaking any demolition works. The condition delaying demolition works until site plan approval is recommended to ensure that the property does not remain vacant for an extended period of time. The applicant is opposed to this condition and has submitted a letter attached to their staff report as Appendix B, outlining their reasons, and their planner is also present today to speak to that. Committee can recommend that council proceed as recommended by staff and the Heritage Committee, or can make a different recommendation. Next slide, please. And lastly, in terms of next steps, the owner will receive notice of receipt, followed by the issuance of the heritage permit, if that's the decision. The property owner may appeal a refused permit or a conditional permit within 30 days of issuance to the Ontario Land Tribunal. If there are no appeals, then the owner can proceed in accordance with the conditions of their permit. Staff are recommending again that site plan control be obtained prior to demolition works occurring as a condition of the permit. We also received, I'll just mention, a question from council regarding an interim use on the site, and staff understand that that specific proposal will be further outlined by the councillor who asked it. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that report. So firstly, Ms. Loft, are you wishing to speak? If you want to come forward, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Christine Loft with Loft Planning Inc., and I am representing the owner of 136 Pine Street, Dorchester Holding Corporation. So the owner proposes to demolish the existing building located at 136 Pine Street. The lands are located within the Collingwood Downtown Heritage Conservation District. As Mr. Teakle identified, a heritage impact assessment was prepared by Archaeological Services, Inc. in June of 2023 and concluded that the removal of the building on the subject property will not result in any negative impacts to the cultural heritage value of the Collingwood Downtown Heritage Conservation District. The report also concluded that the subject property and building do not retain heritage value and do not contribute to an understanding of the Collingwood Downtown Heritage Conservation District. And lastly, the report concluded that any new construction on the property should be designed and executed to meet the objectives and policies of that district plan, in particular to complement and enhance the heritage character of the district. And as such, a future heritage report would be required for any future development plans. We would note that Mr. Teakle's staff report also confirms that the redevelopment of the property in this district still needs to be in accordance with the district plan, including the requirement of a heritage permit in the future. The proposed application was brought forward to the July 17th Heritage Committee, and staff recommended the approval of the demolition of the existing building at 136 Pine, and that as a condition of that heritage permit, site plan control approval would be need to be obtained. We are asking committee to support the Heritage Committee recommendation to approve the permit to demolish without conditions, therefore not requiring that site plan approval be obtained prior to undertaking the site works. We would note that any future development of the property will require site plan approval, as well as a heritage permit, which would need to be supported by a heritage impact assessment based on the proposal for that future development. We had submitted a letter which is attached to Mr. Teakle's report tonight. That letter is dated August 2nd, 2023. Mr. Millsap, the owner on behalf of the Dorchester Holding Corp, is unable to obtain acceptable property and building insurance without extensive structural renovations to the building being completed, and this has been confirmed by a structural engineer. Mr. Millsap has no intention of completing extensive structural work on a building that is proposed to be demolished. And while the building is standing, it does create a liability for both the owner as well as the town, with a vacant building being located close to the downtown. The owner is in possession of both drilled core samples and water reporting, which indicates the levels of contamination on the property. The highest levels of contamination on the site are beneath the existing building, and the soil remediation would be hampered with the presence of the building and would be most efficiently achieved following the removal of the building and the site being vacant. Mr. Millsap wishes to have the site remediated, meaning the building removed and all contaminants removed and disposed of from the property and replaced with suitable fill. This includes remediation costs for haulage and placing of fill, and the owner is ready to proceed as soon as approvals for a demolition permit are issued. We would ask that committee support the Heritage Committee's decision, but without the requirement of site plan approval. We would like to thank staff for the discussions throughout this process and the heritage permit. And Mr. Teagle has also notified me of the wish on behalf of council to discuss any interim uses, and we are open to those discussions. However, the key at this point is to allow the owner to remediate the site as soon as possible. He's ready to go, understands the remediation, and is willing to do the work. And those are my comments.
Thank you, very much. All right. Do we have anyone remotely who wishes to participate?
Thank you, Chair Jeffrey. We do have additional attendees actually at this time. And if the attendees would like to address the staff report, please press the raise your hand feature at the bottom of your screen. And there's no interest at this time. All right. So just if I could clarify through you, Senior Planner, you said that staff were recommending or not recommending site plan, because it doesn't appear in the wording of the motion in my agenda here.
So to the chair, the staff are recommending as a condition, so that site plan approval be required to be obtained prior to any demolition works occurring.
I'm just going to check with the clerk here because it's not in the wording on my copy of the agenda. Unless I'm looking right at it. Okay, and that condition did come through the Heritage Committee. I'm just looking to see if it's included in this last and further that staff be directed to issue the conditional heritage permit within 90 days of serving the applicant with a notice of receipt. Or we don't say what the condition is.
So the condition would be, so I believe that recommendation is in accordance with the Heritage Committee's recommendation, and the Heritage Committee's recommendation includes that condition.
Okay,
for
all right. I wasn't reading it here specifically, so I want to make sure we had it included. All right, so I'm going to read the wording and you can tell me if it's covering what you needed to cover. The staff report P 2023-25 Heritage Permit Application 136 Pine Street recommendation for demolition September 11, 2023 be received, and that council deem the heritage permit application for 136 Pine Street complete, and staff be directed to issue a notice of receipt to the applicant, and further that the issuance of a conditional heritage permit to demolish the existing building located at 136 Pine Street be approved in accordance with the recommendation of the Collingwood Heritage Committee, and further that staff be directed to issue the conditional heritage permit within 90 days of serving the applicant with a notice of receipt. I have a mover and a seconder, please. Deputy Mayor Fryer and Councillor Baines. Questions? Mayor Hamlin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Oops. Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question for Ms. Loft, if I could.
Sure.
Thank you. Through you. I've heard in the community, just as I'm out and about, that the intended use of this property is for a parking lot for the Dorchester Hotel. Is that your understanding?
So I think initially we had pre-consulted on a parking lot, but at this time, Mr. Millsap's not prepared to proceed through the site plan approval process for a parking lot use, and that in time he's looking at other uses for the site.
I see, because I was hoping you'd be saying it was a commercial parking lot and that site plan approval really isn't a big deal for that purpose. But what you're saying is, so what is, through you, Madam Chair, what protection does the municipality have in this instance? Because we've certainly had situations where buildings have come down in town and, because circumstances change after the demolition, we end up with holes or unsightly situations that exist for years and years. And, it's just not a look that I'm sure Mr. Millsap would want, or that, we as representatives of the community would want to have happen. So what protection can we get, as a council to make sure we don't end up with a derelict site there? Thank you.
So through the chair to Mayor Hamlin, a lot grading plan would be required as part of a demolition permit. The intent would be to bring in clean fill. I did speak to the engineers this morning just to get an understanding of what that remediation looked like. And although they couldn't necessarily give me data on the amount of fill coming in and out at this time, but that definitely the clean fill coming in, the site would be leveled. And beyond that, in terms of grass cutting, et cetera, I would imagine it would be municipal bylaw enforcement.
Through you, Madam Chair, to me, that's not good enough. And I guess what I am hoping for, that it would be grassed and there, curbs or whatever's required to make sure that, we're not left. We just had too many, and you've been here a long time, so you can even think of the same ones I'm thinking of. So I just think we need an answer, on how we're going to be left. Is the condition, for example, through you, Madam Chair, that there be a lot grading permit granted that requires sodding and landscaping? Or I don't know what the answer is here, but I just think it has to be something. Those are my questions. Thank you.
All right.
Sure. Yes, thank you. Through the chair, certainly we're open to that type of condition that would require sodding and some level of landscaping. We're certainly open to that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Are yours for Ms. Loft, or I can let Ms. Loft sit down now?
General comments with regard to the staff report.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I am supportive of the staff recommendation that a demolition permit be granted, but that it must be granted conditionally. And I will cite as reason really what the mayor has just said, that we have had bad experiences when we do not have a site control application or some other guarantee, that we have been left with a blight on our landscape. And I'm thinking, most recently of 84 Hurontario Street, which sat unlandscaped, unpaved for I don't even know how many years, right on our main street. And this also is a very sensitive site because it is right adjacent to our very busy restaurant and our farmers market. So we just can't afford to have this site with a demolished building and nothing further done for some indefinite period of time. But I do, on the other hand, I'll just carry on if I may, Chair. I am sympathetic with the challenges of the proponent trying to seek insurance for the property while he's waiting to develop a site plan or some other plan. And I did have the thought, and actually this is kind of following up again on what the mayor just said, that perhaps because it has to be remediated anyway, perhaps the site could be clean fill brought in, landscaping done, sodding, and perhaps it be converted into a parquet for in a temporary use at any rate until the proponent has a site plan that he is able to present to the planning staff. But other than that, I would not be prepared to entertain an option where the building would be demolished with no plan in place.
Just before I go to the next question, Senior Planner Tico, could you respond? I know the mayor asked the proponent, but I think we should be asking staff what other protections there are aside from the condition for site plan. Is there a way to do that does protect us, that would ensure we have some kind of?
So through the chair, well, I guess to the chair, there's certainly, you could add additional conditions around, similar to requiring site plan. You could add conditions similar to the state that you wanted to see the property be put in following the demolition. But I do know that our property standards bylaw does have sections in there that do speak to vacant lots and how they are to be maintained. And I don't know those off the top of my head, but pending there not being any conditions, that would be what would prevail in terms of the state that property needs to be kept in, be my understanding.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I may have another question after, but I'll go Councillor Baines and then Councillor Perry.
Yes, thank you, Chair Jeffrey. Through you to, I believe, Ms. Loft, if I may. In regard to the requirement, if we pass this bylaw for a site plan, is there a potential for regarding your response to a site plan that the remediation could be delayed? I'm worried about the coming winter and losing that opportunity and just the timing there, because no doubt you want to remove the contaminated soil. And I'm thinking of the time of your response in regard to the site plan versus the remediation. Or can you get it done before winter, I suppose I'm saying, and get the soil out before winter?
Through the chair, yes, that is the plan. I mean, we were certainly hoping in July and August to obtain the heritage permit and move forward with the demolition permit. I do think the plan is still, if we're successful before council, that Mr. Millsap would proceed with the remediation and the demolition before winter or before the snow flies. But we would not be in a position to apply for any type of site plan approval as there's no future development plans as of yet. And we're not working towards any site plan application at this time.
So if I may, as a follow-up, just to be clear that the remediation and the demolition are not contingent upon the site plan approval? I suppose I ask Planner Tico that.
No, so through the chair to Councillor Baines, no, so the remediation of the site itself wouldn't be considered development, would be my understanding. So site plan approval would not be required in order to undertake that work.
Great, thank you.
Sorry, it wasn't Councillor Perry, it was Councillor Ring.
Thank you very much, Chair Jeffrey. Through you to Planner Teagle. I've read the report, and in case I'm missing it, I agree with the recommendations of the Heritage Committee, and they say with the conditions of site plan approval. Did they lay any conditions down for that site plan, or is that just a blanket statement, or you get site plan and not really have a condition that they got to meet?
No, it's a process that would be attached. So the demolition would be restricted until the site plan, the COB, I think it was worded, had been advised that the site plan had been. Justin Tico, help.
So through the chair to Councillor Rink. So the condition is simply that they would, so until there is site plan approval for any development, so the range of developments that are proposed there, pretty much anything would require site plan approval, including a commercial parking lot. So the condition would simply require that application be submitted, reviewed, and approved by the town prior to them being able to go to the CBO and get a demolition permit to proceed with removal of the existing building.
Okay.
Mayor Hanlon?
Yes, I wanted to Is this appropriate time to make a motion?
It is. I just have one more really quick question, and it was, I think the main part or the elephant in the room here is we don't want a parking lot. So we're all of this process is going around trying to, how do we prohibit the parking lot scenario, or if that's what we're trying to do here. I don't understand how, but anyway, I'll let you make your motion and maybe you'll fix it for me.
Okay. What I wanted to suggest is a motion where we send this on to council, so there'd be no delay, without a vote yay or nay, but with the opportunity for the applicant and staff to come back to us with a solution on condition that would make sure that the lot is left in a good condition pending future development. And it sounded like from Ms. Loft's answer to me that it may be conditions around a fill permit, for example. Certainly our property standards bylaw doesn't give us any comfort in this kind of situation. So we need something, and I think we need heads to get together and solve this. So that would be my motion. Thank you.
So your motion is to refer the matter directly to council?
Yes, to allow
we have
time.
a seconder? Okay. All right. Fire away, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. And that was good. I was similarly thinking that it seemed to me like the elephant in the room more was coming up with a condition that we were all, the proponent and staff and ourselves were comfortable with. So I'm seconding the motion because that is what I had in mind too. How do we do this without delaying it? Right, is the major goal. And it sounded to me when Ms. Loft explained that she thought sodding would be something that they'd consider. That sounds like there's a solution here that we can have something that, even though it might sit for a little bit, will still be appealing. Unfortunately, I'd have difficulty trying to say that they've got to make it into a parkette. We know the difficulty we have with our own piece of property with making sure that it was safe for people to be on, let alone. So but that's something that we can talk about if we get to that stage in 2 weeks. So those are my comments.
All right. So we're going to vote on the referral. All those in favor? Opposed? None. That was carried unanimously. Thank you. All right. Great solution. Thank you, Mary Hamlin. So next up, T 2023-18 Statement of Development Charge and Cash in Lieu of Parkland Reserve Funds. So we look to Treasurer Quinlan for her introduction of this information.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick summary of the report that's included in today's agenda package. It is an annual requirement of the treasurer to provide this summary of development charge activity and the reserve balances under the Development Charges Act, and similarly the cash in lieu of parkland activity as well as required under the Planning Act. Section 43 of the DC Act, and I'll refer to it as DC so I don't have to say development charges 45 times in this little summary. It requires that the treasurer provides a financial statement to council relating to the development charge bylaws that we have, and also how the reserve funds were established. Again, similarly, sections 37 and 42 of the Planning Act requires the treasurer to do the same for cash in lieu of parkland monies and any density bonusing, which we don't do here in the town of Collingwood. We are required to make these statements available to the public and on request to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and this report satisfies that requirement. I'll give you some brief highlights of the report in terms of the funds as well. At the end of 2022, the total development charge reserve fund balance was $44.2 million. Throughout 2022, we collected $6.1 million in DC fees, versus a 12.8 million in 2021. I think the major difference between the 2 years is just that in terms of market back in 2021, I think we all saw a boom in the housing industry. And in particular, in the town of Collingwood, we did see building permits come forward for some larger projects, about 3 that were greater than 50 or even close to 130 units. So it makes it very high for 2021. So it's a bit of an anomaly. The total funds allocated to eligible projects, meaning the expenses incurred, was just nearly $5 million for 2022 versus $3.3 million in 2021. Just a slight change between the 2 years. And again, just because of market changes and costing as well, I would say that some of the projects have increased in cost significantly. Both Appendix B and Appendix C in the document break down all of the particulars of each DC fund so that you can see which fund collected a certain amount of DCs and how much we've spent within that fund as well. For the cash in lieu of Parkland, at the end of 2022, we had a total reserve fund balance of $642,000. The town collected $216,000 of Parkland funds in 2022 versus just $36,000 in 2021. And there were no funds or no costs allocated within 2022 or 2021. Appendix E also provides the detailed analysis on Parkland's the Parkland levy reserve. And gives you the full information in terms of how much was collected and any projects that were assigned to it. So that's a summary of the overall T 2023-18 and the statement of development charges from the treasurer.
Thank you very much for your report. And I've just asked the clerk to put the chart of the DCs up for us in our presentation while we're asking the public if there's any input. There's no one in the gallery. Is there anyone remotely who would like to ask questions? Or
thank you, Chair Jeffrey. If there's anybody interested that's participating in this meeting remotely, would like to address the committee of the whole regarding the report, please press the raise your hand feature. Not at this time, Chair Jeffrey.
Okay. All right. So our motion is that staff report T 2023-18, the 2022 statement of development charge and cash in lieu of Parkland reserve funds be received for information. And the clerk has graciously put up the development charge reserve funds for us here. And so I'll get a mover and a seconder, and then I'll ask Councillor Perry, Councillor Ring, and questions. All right, Deputy Mayor and Councillor Baines.
Thank you. Nothing specifically question-wise with the report. I think it's excellent, and it has everything needed. I've got some questions that I've had in mind about DCs in general, and do intend in 2 weeks from now to pass this, anticipating that it may be a unanimous vote. It may be considered as one of the items that's being put through with the unanimous vote. If I have some comment to make, then I possibly ask to have it pulled out.
Yes. Yeah. I would advise ahead that you will want it pulled. You're not going to ask for, or unless you're going to ask for, if you're not asking for a change in staff direction, I don't think it matters that night. You can simply pull it to comment.
Maybe just clarify with the clerk that is that a simple process? If it's one of the ones that is being unanimous, can I ask for it just be pulled to speak to?
Certainly. If it's something, sorry, in addition to what's contained in this report or something within the report to be pulled for comment.
Maybe both.
That's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, Councillor Baines.
Thank you, Chair Jeffrey. Through you to Treasurer Quinlan, a small arithmetic question. Page 4 of 8, your Parkland Levy Reserve Fund, the column 2022, your subtotal is $729,220, from which you deduct nothing, from which you transfer nothing to capital funds, and yet your balance is $642,329. What happened to the $86,893 from the subtotal to get to your balance? That's my only question.
Through you, Chair, to Councillor Baines. I did notice that when I was preparing my notes, and the subtotal should be 642,329, which will be corrected in the council report.
But it
hasn't changed.
642,329.
Yeah, so
This is subtotal.
the subtotal is the number
the
that's
subtotal.
in. Yeah,
Oh,
the 729,222 was from a previous document, so it should have been 642,329.
Oh, okay.
So that is an error. Thank you.
All right.
I got one. Yeah.
All right. So I have a mover and a seconder, and if there's no other questions, then I will call the vote. All those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. So now we move into departmental updates, and we will start with the Peel Street Road reconstruction. Peggy, I believe you're Director Slam, I believe you're introducing.
Yes, I am, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. So I want to provide council and the community with some information related to Peel Street urbanization project that we will be undertaking. We're currently within our preliminary design stage, and we are looking at the urbanization of Peel Street from Hume Street south to Collins is what is the area that we're looking at. So staff and the consultant team continue to work on details of the information to be provided at a public information center. However, we wanted council and the public to be aware of this upcoming opportunity for public input. There will be a public information center to be held, or we're slating it for early October, but no date is set yet. So I can provide a further update to council at hopefully the next meeting. We will be contacting residents on Peel Street directly through hand-delivered notices. The PSE will also be advertised through our usual town channels, including the newspaper, social media, website, and there will be an engaged page as well. The PSE will include multiple poster boards that show different potential alternatives for the road reconstruction, with the recommended option noted. The road reconstruction is for road urbanization. So that means storm sewers will be added where they don't exist now. And we're looking at the placement of curb and gutter within the cross section. Some of the design considerations that we have reviewed in the development of the cross section options include recognizing that Peel Street is designated as a collector road. Cycling facilities as per our cycling plan and also the current Book 18 guidelines. Looking at potential of traffic calming measures and what would be appropriate for a collector road. Sidewalk on both sides of the road. Today there's only sidewalk on the west side. And some options look at retaining the on-street parking and some options do not. So similar to some challenges we experience when we're looking at road reconstruction or road urbanization projects, redesigning an existing street with an established right-of-way, we can't always fit in everything that we have according to our engineering standards. So in this case, when you look at our engineering standard for a collector road, it is a 26 meter wide right of way, and we only have a 20 meter right of way here. So that's why, again, we need to balance some of the options within the design. So staff and the consultant also recently met with the Trails and Active Transportation Advisory Committee to get their input on the preferred design options. Staff are gathering some further information and costs related to some suggestions that came forward through that positive discussion with the committee members, and so they'll be looking at that and at the potential of incorporating some of the suggestions and designs to be presented to the public. So again, just looking for council and the public to be aware that this is coming forward in October.
Okay. Thank you very much. Committee members have any questions for the director on this one? If not, we'll ask Director Slama to move into the Findlay Drive traffic calming and cycling facility.
Great. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So staff started looking at Findlay Street from a traffic calming perspective following the establishment of our traffic calming policy. Staff initiated traffic calming evaluation based on numerous resident comments received around the establishment of a policy and based on some of the data that had been collected on Findlay prior to the implementation of our traffic calming policy. During design, staff met with the Trails and Active Transportation Advisory Committee to gather their input, and this resulted in staff reviewing and incorporating cycling facilities in the project as well. In line with the town's traffic calming policy, the design is to be shared with residents that are directly impacted by the implementation of traffic calming measures. So staff are preparing to initiate the public consultation component of the traffic calming policy. We will be hand delivering letters to residents along Findlay Drive. We also have an Engage page that will be available for members of the public to view, and that is slated to be live this Friday, September the 15th. The Engage page will share 3 potential options for the community to review. The first option is maintaining the on-street parking and looking at sharrows along Findlay Drive. So that means the vehicles and the cyclists would move together in the same lane. The second option is what we've termed substandard bike lanes. But using that term, what I would like to explain is that the guidelines for bike lanes recommend a 1.5 meter bike lane and a minimum of 1.2. And the option 2 that's being presented looks at a 1.3 meter bike lanes. So we're above the minimum, but we're not at the recommended 1.5. And it also includes the delineation of bike lanes, of the bike lanes, with pavement markings, and also we're looking to implement the green paint within the bike lane to identify it. The third option is implementing what's termed as advisory bike lanes. So this would show a delineated 1.8 meter wide bike lane on each side of the road, and it would result with a 5 meter shared center lane. So you've got vehicles that need to move into the shared center lane when they're passing a bike in the bike lane, and then they can I'm going to use the word straddle the bike lane when an oncoming car, we're approaching an oncoming car. So those are the 3 options. And again, details and some visuals will be provided on the Engage page to help explain these and demonstrate them. So we're interested in hearing from residents in the area. We know that Findlay is a travel corridor to the school. We've got 2 schools off of Findlay. There's also the Cameron Public School that parents and children are moving to, and there's a local park and some other town amenities in the area. So while we're not hand delivering notices to all the residents in the area, just those along Findlay Drive, we do hope that residents in the Mountain Croft and Summit View developments, as well as those living off Saunders, Stanley, Mary, and Stephen Streets, will take an interest in the project and provide their input on the preferred option to achieve traffic calming in the area.
Okay. Are there any questions for Director Slama with respect to these? Yes. Councillor Barry and then the mayor.
Well, thank you, Chair. Just quick question on does this include a crossing at High? Like a signaled crossing or anything?
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Perry. It does. It does include a pedestrian crossover, design at High.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. That's great news.
Thank you for mentioning that.
Mayor Hanlon?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I just had a question about notice to the community, and I totally understand hand delivering notice to people who live on Findlay. I'm just wondering if there might be a way to give notice to the people in that broader community you've described, And I believe I saw some almost like placards that were used recently to give notice to, I think it was one of our new park consultations. So this is really more of a comment, I guess, if staff could think if there'd be some way to put notices up in the community. Thank you.
Well, I was having the same thoughts myself. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you for that. And then, so most important that people engage in our process, either by EngageCollingwood or letting us know. All right, so that brings us to 6.3, which I will turn to the CAO and ask for her update regarding engineering resources.
Thank you, Chair. I did want to just keep everyone in the loop. As you know, I've been losing a little bit of sleep over engineering resources, and I'm looking forward to bringing forward some more on that in context with the overall budget in a few weeks. And I can't believe it's already that close that the budget's only a few weeks away, but I know the treasurer and the departments are working hard on those. The engineering division has been short-staffed for a while, and they do have quite a lot of work, even more than we realized at the last budget. We've been very actively recruiting to fill all the positions in 23. I did discuss 10 or so positions with Director Slama last week across Public Works, Engineering Services, and the Engineering Department. So it's been very active for them and HR, and there has been some success. Outside of that, however, in May, one of the really valued members of our engineering team, Stuart West, who you heard from earlier today on the presentation he provided to you on 6th Street, was promoted from our project engineer to the manager of engineering. And from that promotion till today, we've been actively recruiting to replace the project engineer, which was his previous position. We have enhanced that ad, put it out again, and put it out to a larger group of places to advertise positions, with hope that we'll find someone great. And we hope that the public and staff and council who are interacting with good project engineers out there will help direct people to our applications. We were very happy that at the start of August, we had a new member added to the team, Stephanie Thorne, who is our engineering technologist. She'll be helping with the engineering review of development applications and looking at developments when they're in flight, so being constructed by the developer. We know we have lots of issues and lots of concerns by neighbors and the like when those activities are underway for the years following council's endorsements. We have also extended the retention of a part-time municipal government experienced engineer who'd retired elsewhere. His name is Ed Duljevic, and he is leading our engineering standards review and update, as well as our transportation master plan in conjunction with Stuart West and Manager West and Director Slama. He has committed to lead the transportation master plan over the next year, because we do think that this priority project needs to receive the undivided attention of a single custodian who's experienced in leading this type of work, to keep the council and the community informed, to keep the project on schedule. And frankly, there's a lot of moving pieces as information from the transportation side interacts with speed limits and parking needs and the like. Unfortunately, even with these two, we did need to take a look at the operational plan to make sure that the things that we're doing well, and thus made some specific decisions around what we could possibly push off. And what's we've determined is that the inflow and infiltration study, this is for wastewater. So wastewater as it leaves many houses or businesses and then flows to the wastewater treatment plant. We've been having some overflow issues there related to the infiltration of non-wastewater, so like mostly rainwater into the system. We did have to push that study out into 2024, hopefully to initiate in the first quarter. And the master servicing plan, we had hoped to, so that's the servicing needs to the community in the long term, with particularly water and wastewater, the comprehensive review. We pushed that out to now commence in 2025. So we're going to get through the development charges review and some of the other work, and then start a master servicing plan update. A third piece, which wasn't necessarily a direction of council, but I just wanted to inform you, we have been taking a certain amount of leadership on the overall Southern Georgian Bay transportation file, looking at the types of projects that would be advantageous in the next, say, 3 years, as well as pushing forward to take a multi-municipality approach to with MTO around a bypass for Highway 26 and overall all transportation planning for the area. And we do intend to speak to the other municipalities about one of them taking up the mantle for that overall leadership while we make sure that we triage and take care of the things that are really key importance here, while hopefully we can find another person to take up that mantle. We do have a lot of things we're focusing on, and I don't want to leave you with any impression that there's not a lot of work going on. We are looking at the project engineer recruitment, making sure we've got the right things in the budget across the engineering function. Off the top of my head, I think there's about 70 million of our 120 million is in that one department. So there's a lot of work preparing there to make sure we've got the right plans and that our non-core assets, asset management plan, new thinking is finished there. The official plan update, second draft, the development application process and fees review, which streamlines processes and right sizes fees, supporting the treasurer in her development charges study, continuing forward with a variety of capital projects, and as our very best efforts to address customer service questions. And that's the key pieces. Thank you for this time to keep everybody in the loop.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the CAO? I think that'll come forward in our future discussions. Okay. All right. So, and then what had been added, 6.4, I just ask Executive Director Peg just to comment briefly on the public engagement process for the grain terminals.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chair. So I'm happy to provide an update to the committee this evening. So Saturday, August 26th was a soft launch of the engagement plan. Staff and members of the council did attend the farmers market booth, and this was an opportunity really to build awareness about this project and support registration for the project's Engage page. We had a great turnout. Lots of feedback was provided in real time and lots of different people from different walks of life. We even had an aspiring engineer who I think was about 10 years old that asked all the best questions. But it was really exciting to see youth coming out as well and providing some of their initial comments. We are gearing up to launch the full engagement plan, which will see a hard launch on October 7th. So please save the date. We're anticipating this launch to be at the farmers market as well. It will be the last farmers market of the season. And Streetcar and Dream is planning to attend with us. So it will be a collaborative launch opportunity. Currently, staff in Streetcar are working collaboratively as partners with Red Brick Communications, who's supporting the town, and Urban Strategies, who was retained by Streetcar, to help with finalizing key elements of the engagement plan. We certainly recognize, though, that there will be elements led by the town, so the public realm enhancements, in that Streetcar and Dream have their own unique requirements under the Planning Act for their development, but we are going to be taking a collaborative approach as much as possible to help ensure that there's not, like from the community perspective, it's one project, so we don't want to cause confusion, but do recognize the different roles that each parties play. So with the plan that's being drafted right now, there's definitely lots of opportunities for in-person, virtual, and hybrid feedback to be provided. Certainly will not be a one survey approach, so it is a robust plan. And it is taking us some time to put it in place, but we want to make sure that every opportunity is considered. And also, as the Deputy Mayor had mentioned at the start of the council meeting, we are simultaneously running a community engagement update. So we were also mindful of not wanting to cause confusion between those different initiatives, and selfishly maybe wanted to take the feedback from that process and apply it to our grain terminals engagement plan, recognizing that this is such a significant project to our community. We're also finalizing details on targeted outreach to our key stakeholders and landowners or Indigenous groups. And then I do have some other related exciting news that I would love to share with council. So Adam Gallant, who's our fleet and facilities coordinator, actually started today in a project manager position supporting the grain terminal project team. So it's great to bring additional expertise and enthusiasm to the project. So Adam will be joining me in providing updates to council in the not too distant future. And yeah, I guess just finally, thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to provide the update. And we look forward to having more discussions with the community and council in the weeks ahead.
Thank you very, very much for doing that. I don't see anybody has any other questions. So that will take us, we have no reports or minutes of other committees or boards. We have no consent agenda items. So we'll move right to other business, and I'll go to Vice Chair Doherty, who had a notice of motion.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I did. I had received communication I shared with the CAO from the Escarpment Corridor Alliance, and they are in process right now of completing a Natural Resources Canada Climate Adaptation Grant. And they were seeking endorsement from the town of Collingwood with the rationale that the data that they would be compiling would have regional implications. They shared some detail with the CAO with regard to their specific focus, which isn't precisely what the town could support. But we do certainly want to support any effort to bring forward some climate change adaptation and natural heritage planning tools into our community as a whole. So I do have a motion. I was going to provide notice, but because of the timing for the application deadline, which is September 22nd, which is before our next meeting, I would ask the support of council to waive notice and consider the motion this evening.
Councillor Doherty, because this isn't a council meeting, we cannot consider it. Would still have to go to council. It would be a recommendation to council. It's not a committee decision to.
Okay. Now we have a placeholder next week for any in-camera matters. I'm wondering, through you to the clerk, do we anticipate that we may be meeting, which is the 18th? And in that case, we could consider this motion finally in that meeting.
Through the chair, yes, there is going to be an in-camera meeting next week, and if this item is to be added, seeing as it is in camera only, you'd have to have, similar to requesting a special meeting of council, a majority of council supporting that being added to the agenda, or the mayor has the authority to add to that agenda.
So all eyes are on the mayor.
happy to exercise that authority.
Okay. There, that's great. That's taken care of. All right.
Thank you. So I'll read in the notice then for consideration next week. To direct the CAO to consult with the Escarpment Corridor Alliance, seeking to to enable endorsement of their Natural Resources Canada Climate Adaptation Project grant application by the town of Collingwood.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Clerk has it. All right. And so my notice of motion, not fully worded yet, but anyway, given that National Tree Day is September 20th, 23, and the mayor had previously urged in one of our former meetings, I'd like to ask for staff to review the tree caliper requirements in our development planning and bring back a recommendation wherein council could implement or include a greater percentage of larger tree caliper planting in our developments. So it'll be worded some other way. And I know that Director Slama will probably tell me how that can be done.
Friendly amendment, Chair, that they could be indigenous trees.
Yes, we already have that as part of our policy. If we did that, we would defer to that anyway.
Thank you.
Correct? Right. Who is it? Summer?
Yes.
Yeah, Director Valentine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a reminder to Council that we already have a suite of projects underway with respect to tree preservation, which includes a review of the tree cutting bylaw, as well as development of a site alteration bylaw, a review of our urban design standards and engineering standards, the latter two of which reference the caliper requirements for trees within developments. So there's already a project ongoing with consultant recommendations to come forward in the future around this question. I wonder perhaps to the clerk whether it's further direction to ensure that the consultant does indeed consider this through their recommendations and provides their professional opinion as to the direction that the town should go.
Clerk Almost. Certainly. Through the chair, I would recommend maybe the chair have a conversation with staff and we'll come up with the appropriate wording if that's something that you'd want to consider as part of that motion that comes forward on the 25th.
Yeah. Okay. Because future can be scary. All right. That's great. So I will work with staff on that, which brings us to number 10, public. Oh, there's any other business? Yeah. Mayor Hamlin.
Yes, at the end of the council meeting that was held just before this one, our deputy mayor mentioned the event on September the 23rd that the Kellys are holding. And since that meeting, Miss Kelly sent me an article that since your remarks, Forbes magazine has now done an article on it, profiling them, Collingwood, and this event. Which is awesome for us. So I just thought I'd mention that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay. So public delegations, we have no one in the gallery who wishes to depute to us. Is there anybody remotely, please?
Yes, there is, Chair. We have Justin Jones would like to speak to Committee of the Whole. So we will unmute him.
Okay. Welcome, Justin.
And as a delegation, he'd be permitted up a maximum of 5 minutes speaking to anything within the committee's jurisdiction.
All right. And because this is not a registered deputation, it's audio only.
Correct.
All right. So
okay.
Are you good? Proceed.
Wonderful. Y'all can hear me okay?
We can.
All right. Excellent. So I'm speaking to you this evening because it was the only option available to me to speak on the matter of 6th Street. And so I just wanted to raise a few things today before making a formal deputation in the future. The first thing that I wanted to flag for the committee through you, Madam Chair, is that if you look in the province of Quebec at the Ministry de Transport de Québec, in 2008, the Ministry of Transport of Quebec, with over 20 years of experience in instituting bidirectional cycling facilities on a bidirectional roadway, made the decision that that type of facility was no longer going to be recommended within the province of Quebec due to the significantly increased level of risk that it exposed people on bikes to. A bidirectional corridor on a bidirectional roadway, particularly with the number of driveways that we're talking about on 6th Street, at every single one of those driveways, that exposes a person on a bike to between 3 and 12 times the collision risk compared to a unidirectional facility. So I wonder, when we see the types of discussions that we're having around the low number of people riding or walking on that corridor, and that being used as a justification, if that is the level of ambition that we have as a town, that we don't want to grow that. Because when I look at the design that is being proposed, and when I look at some of the design materials that are being advised, what I see is the sidewalk on the north side maintained at the bare minimum of 1.5 meters. That is the required minimum, not the desired under the AODA, the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. I see a 3-meter multi-use path, which again, under Book 18 is the bare minimum. The desired width is 3.5 meters. And then when I look at the road lanes and I see 3.5 plus 0.3 meters of gutter space, I'm seeing something that is above the recommended maximum width under the Transportation Association of Canada's guidelines for urban roadways that carry transit vehicles. That maximum is 3.7. The recommended is 3.3. So my question is that when we are looking at these kinds of things, why are we going with the bare minimum for everything but drive lanes? And we also heard a lot about Ontario Traffic Council in Book 18, and I wonder if staff and consultants also consulted the multimodal level of service design guide that was published in February 2022 by the same Ontario Traffic Council that provides guidelines for a made-in-Ontario methodology to assess the performance of all travel modes on Ontario streets, particularly when it comes to discussing trade-offs in a constrained right-of-way. To me, this seems as though it's a very relevant document for this particular discussion. And when you punch in the particular design features of the corridor as it exists right now, the target level of service, it's basically on an A to F. So it's the same as if you were at school. The target for our design on that street, because it's an urban boulevard within that design guide, would be a C for walking and a B for cycling. Currently, we are sitting at a D for walking, north side only, and an E for cycling. The design as proposed with the multi-use path on the south side maintains that D level on the north and provides an F level of service for people walking on the south side. It also provides an F level of service for cycling. So we are moving from a E as it exists to an F for cycling, and we are moving from a D on the north side to an F on the south side. We are significantly diminishing the experience of people cycling, significantly diminishing the safety of people cycling on that corridor, also that we can try and add a below average experience for people walking on the south side. Now, staff mentioned that the analysis that they did said that they would have to relocate utility poles. When I did a mock-up of the cross-section using their same design criteria and their same design widths, I actually came up with a design width that used the exact same design space that they were using, didn't move any curbs anywhere else, and would not encroach on those design poles, and would still provide a one-way separated cycling facility above the curb that would operate much more safely. Now, this does not provide pedestrian experience on the south side, but I would argue that for us to move from an E to an F for cycling on the only east-west cycling corridor through the city, while providing a level F level of service on the south side for people walking, it is not a good trade-off. And so I would just ask really quickly that this be sent to peer review, that we take a second look at this, because the City of Barrie is coming out with a staff report on September 27th that recommends exactly against this kind of design on this kind of corridor.
Okay.
Let's wait until that staff report lands, please.
Okay. Thank you for your contributions. And I know that you are very passionate and very knowledgeable. So thank you for that. So Clerk Almas, if you could tell me if there's someone else who would like to speak to this.
Thank you, Chair Jeffrey. We did have another hand raised, but apparently the hand is put down now. Oh, we have it returned. Looks like a Donna Knowles. Is that you, Murray? We will unmute the speaker. Okay.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I apologize for forgetting to change the name from my wife to my own name on the Zoom call. I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes as well on the 6th Street situation and the reconstruct there. In actual fact, I'm probably being about 3 days premature here a little bit. We did have a small subcommittee of the Trails and Active Transportation Committee sit with the engineering folks a few weeks ago. And we are going to be talking to the group, giving the whole group, I guess, this coming Thursday, the feedback that we have. And our feedback will be to that particular group. And I don't want to presuppose how everybody would vote on this, but we will be supporting a cycle tracks type design for 6th Street as opposed to the multi-use pathway design that's being proposed. Just a couple of things, and I guess our main rationale for doing this. Two of our principles, as a committee, as an advisory committee, are obviously safety and connectivity. As Justin has already mentioned, there are a number of places now that are not recommending a multi-use pathway design in an urban environment, so I won't go through any more of that. From a safety point of view, I guess our concern is we do have our own personal experience on 1st Street. It's a situation on the north side of the street where they have, again, multiple driveways, multiple roads coming in. And we are fairly actively in consultation with the Parks and Rec Department, trying to arrange for the bicycle traffic, for most of the bicycle traffic, to not use that facility, but ultimately to use the Harborview Trail in behind the stores. So it seems to be quite inconsistent for us as a town to be in one location trying to discourage people from using this particular type of facility for obvious safety reasons. At the same time, we are planning to place another one in another part of town to do the same thing. There are something like 63 or 65 driveways along 6th Street, plus the same number of crossroads that exist on 1st Street. It just does not seem to be the correct design. I would highlight that I was there in council chambers earlier on today, and I drove down on my bike. I had 2 incidents on 1st Street just on my way down to sit at the council meeting. Nothing bad happened, obviously, because I can usually see them coming, but it's just a situation of people just look left when they come out and they don't look to the right at all because that's not where they want to go. The second part of it, I guess, is just the whole issue of connectivity, and we have some real concerns about that. Obviously, if you go east of here, Ontario Street, we have a shared situation there on Hamilton Street. So we've got bicycles on the north side of the street and bicycles on the south side of the street. With a multi-use pathway design, they would obviously all need to somehow get over onto the south side of 6th Street. Going at the other end of the equation, right out at High Street, if you go west from High Street, we have a multi-use pathway on the north side of the street. So now we have a situation where going through that intersection, anybody on a bike would have to go from one side of the street to the other. Not a convenient thing to do. And it was mentioned earlier on, I guess, at the council meeting that, cyclists still do have the option of just using the roadway as opposed to the multi-use path. And I would agree with that they do have that option. But I would state that, the people who would use that option, the only people who would use that option would be what I will call experienced cyclists, confident cyclists that are not uncomfortable working within traffic. They represent about 12% of the population. there's 55% of the population who are willing to cycle but are extremely concerned about safety and their own personal safety. And, certainly many of the things that we're trying to do as part of the Trails and Active Transportation Committee is to encourage many, many more people to start using cycling as a mode of transportation for obvious reasons of climate change, greenhouse gases, all those nice things. So that's my 2 cents for the day. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much for taking the time. All right. Do we have any other hands up? I don't believe we do. All right. So with that concludes our agenda this evening. I'd just like to say congratulations to the deputy clerk and her team. That was a pretty smooth inauguration of our new AV system here. Well done. We only had one complaint. That was about. Yeah. Anyway, all right. So adjournment. Councillor Potts. All those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you.